But what I think you are able to do is travel backward in the life that you just led. Like if you die at 70 years old, for example, and you're there standing before her, you have the option of going back in time in the life you just led and relive.
A Kodega is a guide and a storyteller, escorting you through the night, lighting the way, warding off thieves, ghosts, demons, and other oddities. Along the journey, his companions would often share with him the most curious of stories that he'd record in his codex. Perhaps you just might find yourself traveling with a Kodega and sharing one of yours. Click that like.
Yeah!
If you're new here, subscribe and have the bell hit for notifications to stay up to date on all of the new content. In 1901, two women claimed they had an experience that defied the very laws of time. While visiting the Palace of Versailles in France, they took a wrong turn and found themselves in a world that seemed to belong to the past. The gardens, the people, even the clothes were from the 18th century. They later described seeing figures dressed in old-fashioned attire, hearing strange sounds, and feeling an overwhelming sense of unease, as if they had stepped into a different era. The strange occurrence, known as the Morborlet-Surzan incident, sparked debates and theories about whether these women had somehow traveled back in time or if they had stumbled upon a time slip, a moment where past and present collided, something we talked about recently in my last live as well. As we delve into these perplexing tales, one question lingers. Could time be more fluid than we imagined, with moments of the past bleeding into our present? That's where I come in. I'm Rai, the Kodega, your guide through the fog of the unknown. Tonight, we got another enigma to add to my codex of curiosities, where we unravel the threads of history, mystery, and the unexplainable. Tonight, I'm excited to bring back the one and only Walter Bosley. For those who missed that episode, it was called Portals, Time Travel, and Disneyland, Episode 5. For those who don't know Walter, he has written many books that explore a wide range of mysteries, including the enigmatic deaths in the early 20th century California, the concept of breakaway civilizations and the secret space programs, and even the potential realities of time travel. Notable works include the Empire of the Wheel series, Shimmering Light, which investigates a possible UFO-related government project, and his guide on time travel for enthusiasts. And that's the one I'd love to focus on tonight. Walter's writings challenge mainstream narratives and invite readers to look into the unknown, questioning the boundaries of history, science, and reality itself. So, without further ado, I guess I do have the basics as usual. I would like to say, thank you to everybody for coming out and, watching, sharing, and liking the show. I always appreciate that. If you want to support the show, there's a Patreon. You can subscribe to be a member, or you can just share the show. Without further ado, let's bring Walter to the stage. Walter, how are you doing tonight?
Pretty good. How you doing, Ryan?
I'm doing fantastic. Your last interview that we had was my 5th episode, and it was one of my best episodes to date still. It's doing really, really great, and it was extremely, extremely interesting when we jumped into the 33rd parallel that runs through Los Angeles, Disneyland, and the carousel. Is it carousel or is it a merry-go-round? What exactly is the terminology of that?
That's technically a merry-go-round. When it's all horses, it is a merry-go-round. The carousel is the menagerie, so to speak. Either the mix of various animals, real or fantasy, because you can have with zebras and horses and tigers, you can have sea dragons and other unicorns and other fantasy animals. But yes, that's the difference. All horses, it's a merry-go-round.
Interesting. It's something I've never actually pondered before until now. And I know I heard you bring it up before in some of your shows. And of course, I wasn't really paying attention to that point. And I'm like, it just slipped my mind. So here we are. That's fantastic. So Walter, if you want to give a little brief introduction, I gave a little bit one, but if you want to add to that and tell everyone where they can find you, that'd be great.
Oh, well, walterbosley.com is my website. And also I have the Walter Bosley channel on YouTube, which I do a live stream definitely every Wednesday. Sometimes I do additional ones through the week, but those are the main places you can find me.
Fantastic. That is awesome. Yeah, I've tuned in a couple of times to your show, and I thoroughly enjoy it. I watched the one with Dr. Sam with the Bosnian pyramids, and I was very enthralled with that one. And I so much so that I ended up having to reach out to him and have him on my show because it was really fascinating.
Yeah, it's interesting stuff. And what's frustrating for me was I spent a number of years, 6 years, with one employer traveling the world. I worked exclusively out of the United States, a different country every month, 7 or 8 months a year. And I've been to Bosnia several times on that job, but it was before I ever heard about Bosnian pyramids. And I was like right down the highway from where these are. I could have easily have taken time off from work and driven up there and checked them out. But alas, I didn't hear about these until I wasn't doing that job anymore. But it is still cool and fun that being familiar with the areas that he talks about. I have a sense of the geography, and it's fascinating. I mean, I think there's something to what he says. You always get folks that, have the opposing voice and the opposing opinion, and he's certainly encountering that.
I do agree. After I posted that show, and I love and hate Reddit, and so I shared it on Reddit. And, I got some great support, but then there, of course, there's the people that calling Dr. Sam out. And, it's very strange because I posted in sites that you believe where people will be more open to it and questioning the narrative that we have. But a lot of them are just as indoctrinated, or I don't want to say indoctrinated. I don't like that word, but I mean, they're just kind of closed-minded. They still believe what they're being told on many things. Some of the things they're not. They do question things, but there's aspects that they just still like to stick to and still and still not question authority.
Sure, these are the people that still believe that Cheops was the builder of that Great Pyramid. Yeah. Since then, we've learned that Colonel Weiss, who was involved with the, alleged identifying of that pyramid, with Cheops, I believe, or with the Egyptians, with Pharaoh and stuff, was proven to have been a fraud. So now, oh my goodness, what are the mainstream certainty addicts going to do now? What you mentioned, that's kind of a sad fact of our community. We do have this thread of what's called certainty addicts, people with the fetish for certainty. It's got to be certain. It's got to be certain, or they don't even want to hear stuff talked about. My question is, when you get that far, to the extent some of these guys are, I don't even know why they're here in the community, because this, what we do is we come together to talk about these fascinating possibilities and ideas, and most of us aren't drawing. There's people that will draw conclusions too soon, but we're here because we like to talk about these amazing things: time travel, pyramids, lost civilizations. And the guys who just want certainty, okay, that's okay if you need certainty before you decide for yourself, but they go too far and they harass and they complain and they just want other people to stop talking about things.
Yes.
And my thing is, go away, go follow sports, or be a mathematician.
Exactly.
If you want certainty, be a mathematician.
Yeah. Look at those statistics, And I agree with you. It's kind of like we'd like to get together and talk about I would say probabilities. Yeah. I like that term, because there is a chance. I'm not saying that everything is 100% exactly, this is everything. I believe it's healthy to have a bit of skepticism
Sure.
when approaching things.
You have to.
Yeah. And
you do, because there's charlatans and hoaxers out there. Of course there are, but
yes.
There's nothing wrong with talking about the possibilities, and there's nothing wrong with admitting when you've personally drawn a conclusion for yourself that, there's things that I think are real, but I'm not about to go out there and advocate that everybody agree with me. This is definitely the way it is. I just like to say, hey, I personally on particular things have been convinced. And that's the way I like to put it. Leave other people to decide for themselves. But some of these people don't even like that. There's that other thread of people we have, the ones that want to be told what to think about something, and have a little more self-confidence and respect.
And I agree with you totally. And like to be able to actually say that you're wrong as well, I think is one of the greatest things. And I've done that where I've gone down a certain path where I was believing something, and then I've had to take a step back and be like, whoa, fool me once, but like, I would say I did get a little into Q a little bit, QAnon. And I was like, oh, this sounds interesting. This sounds great. Like, we're cleaning up the world. It was the same thing over and over again. And in the end, not in the end, but when I realized it was like, they just want you not to do anything. They want you to be a spectator to life and not take part in it. So yeah, sit down, trust the plan, which means you just sit there, don't do anything, and we have to be our own heroes, our own saviors, not waiting for someone else to do it.
That's right.
But one thing they did bring up, was a little bit of something which was I think it was Operation or Project Looking Glass. Does that ring a bell to you?
Yes, it does, and it's a mixed bag.
Okay, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, the one that gets talked about a lot, there's one that's murky.
Okay,
it's out there, and to be honest, not a lot is known about it, which means it's probably the legitimate one. But the other one, my understanding, comes out of the Bob Lazar stuff. And I'll put it that way, stuff. For the record, I openly, gladly admit Bob Lazar has no credibility with me. I don't buy his stuff. And it was pretty much explained years ago, but we got a carnival barker in the community, and he revived the guy. And unfortunately, we have a whole new generation of people in this community that are buying the Bob Lazar story. And this came out of the Bob Lazar stuff, lore. And for me, it goes downhill from there. And just
fair enough.
I classify it in the category with Father Ernetti's chronovisor, which he admitted on his deathbed was a hoax, and Baird. Stuart Baird? No, that's a photographer. The guy named Baird, last name Baird. He had the camera of past events. And Father Ernetti, admitted that he was inspired to make his chronovisor up based on the Baird camera of past events. And it was so goofy that the image of Christ that Father Ernetti claimed was an actual image of Christ. I mean, the minute you look at it, it's clearly a devotional statue in a church or something, and you're like, you've got to be kidding, And but he admitted it was a hoax on his deathbed. But there's always going to be people that, oh, are you sure? Maybe he was just saying that, and on and on. So the Project Looking Glass issue. The one that's the popular one, it's unfortunately, it's the fruit of the tree thing, like in law. If the tree's bad, the fruit probably is too.
Fair enough. Yeah. And one thing I will say though is I am quite skeptical of Bob Lazar, but I believe though that you have to have some truth within there to be able to latch on to some people. So I do believe there are some tidbits of truth, but the amount that he's talking about, I'm like, I don't. Yeah.
In all fairness to Lazar, the one school of thought that I'm presently in is that the people that say there was a perception management operation or whatever going on, and he was used. He was walked past a door where he glimpsed the alien, and the whole, the thing could have been a setup.
Yeah.
So I'm not doing the theory justice. The people out there that have presented it present more detailed, but I do consider that maybe someone was joking around with him, or he was exposed to a perception management thread because they wanted to see, maybe who would talk to unauthorized people, who would believe it, and there's many reasons to do something like that.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, he might have been duped, and
Yeah.
He's doing his best to milk a second career out of it.
Or to the, maybe to his credit, maybe he was duped so much so that he actually believes everything that he's talking about.
And that's the thing. If it was a duping, even I have to say that what you said, it's like, okay, he might really believe, what he saw and what he was told. See, one of the things that critics have pointed out about Lazar is he claimed that the sport model was in this S4 hangar area or whatever it was. And, they've gone out there and looked at that and there's nothing there. Well, for all we know, he could have been taken somewhere else and told that it was the S such and such area. See, and he believed it. So,
yeah, it's why not have like a control of the narrative by having someone who believes it so heartedly, that you control it like that, and you just feed him this false information, and you.
Sure.
Interesting. So Walter, you've written some books, and the time travel one is one that it really, really intrigues me. Can we go into that? Can you give us a synopsis of the book? And
this one right here.
That is it.
Yeah, and okay, here we go. The guy who just criticized Lazar for stuff, and I write my nutty time travel guidebook. But here's the thing. There's the other narrative out there people do is, well, you can't criticize anyone else's hypothesis if you have extraordinary or crazy hypotheses of your own. And you know what? Wrong. Yes, you can, because it's all about how you go about it. And with this book right here, what I did was it's intended to be primarily a nice, fun, thought-provoking read, okay, about a particular possible method of time travel. Because I acknowledge that, not everybody, there's reasons to doubt whether time travel could actually work.
Yeah.
But we don't know for sure, in my opinion. I personally think it's possible. I have my own personal, I don't know how unique it is, but I haven't really heard anyone else propose it exactly.
I believe we talked about it in our last interview. Was that like the inversion? Numerical?
in my particular case, I think age inversion had something to do with it. But the key feature is, I think we're all capable of time travel at the moments right after we've died. Once you're in the afterlife, I think this explains Hecate at the triple crossroad. The triple crossroad being the intersection of past, present, and future. She is primarily the guardian of the gate of time and moving through time space. In my opinion, this is what I've come to over. It was I kind of, let's say, Hecate introduced herself to me in 2007, and by 2014, there were reasons I was led to this idea, this conclusion. And but what I think you're able to do is travel backward in the life that you just led. Like if you die at 70 years old, for example, and you're there standing before her, you have the option of going back in time in the life you just led and relive, a number of years of that. Now, where the inversion thing comes in is, when I think, and yes, I don't know for sure, people, I'm not telling you to believe me. I'm just telling you what I think. When I had my weird experience with this, I think I was 16, and over the course of, a few decades and research and thought and experiences and what have you, I wondered, okay, I had my reasons for wondering, okay, did I live this life before? Did I die at 61? And so did that determine where I was able to jump back to 16, in other words, or if I died at 72, I'd be able to go back to 27 and on and so forth. That was the idea that I think I talked about last time.
That is
And
correct.
I hope it's different every time, because I'm approaching my 61st birthday and I don't want to die again so soon. It's like, dang, I hope you can't hear my squeaky chair. That's my personal hypothesis about one possible method of time travel. But the other one that has intrigued me is what I call consciousness driven. And we've seen this popularly portrayed in, most famously in the film Somewhere in Time, the big romantic 1980 film with Jane Seymour and Christopher Reeve. It was like
now I'm like, I've watched a lot of time travel movies, lot, and I have not seen that one. I know. I'm like, it's called Somewhere in Time. I know. I don't know. I'm gonna find it and I'm gonna watch it.
It's women love the thing because it's, oh my gosh, it's romantic and all that, but it's the way he travels through time, consciousness driven. The will is a part of it, and what I call, it's like a grappling hook. And you have to have a grappling hook to throw back into your target time. And that grappling hook does what a grappling hook does. It latches on, and you're able to pull yourself towards the grappling hook. Okay. Now, the grappling hook, in the case of what's depicted in the film and in the novel that the film draws from, and in another book I'll talk about, it is, in this particular case, romantic love, right? What stronger force is there to draw a man across thousands of, or hundreds of years, or whatever, tens of years, to be with the lady he's fallen in love with because he's seen a photograph of her. And that's the emotional grappling hook, and his will, his desire to be back there, is what facilitates his manifesting himself in the past physically. Okay. And I was intrigued with this. And also the stories of Jack Finney, specifically, his time travel stuff that he's famous for is a collection of short stories or novellas titled The Third Level, and that was written in 1950. And then in 1970, he came out with a novel titled Time and Again, and it preceded the Somewhere in Time novel by 5 years. And what's interesting is it also used this consciousness, will-driven time travel. In that one, there's a secret government agency run by the military, the DOD, in which time travelers or prospective time travelers are sequestered in these little cubicles that are decorated and furnished and everything like the target year or era that they, if you want to go back to ancient Rome, you're sequestered in a cubicle that's like in a little house or apartment in Rome back in the ancient times. The Old West, same thing. And so the main character is recruited by an army officer, an intelligence officer, and the main character is able to do this more easily than the other time travelers. And of course there's a woman he falls for back then, and there's that similarity, and there's coming back and forth in the story. But what I found really intriguing about that was how close it fits the basic description of the classic legendary remote viewing program that the Army started in the 70s. And I thought, wow, this is so close. Jack Finney's Time and Again, find it. It's a good book. Yep. But it's so close to what the remote viewing program claims to have done. And remember, they look through time and space, according to Lynn Buchanan and Joseph McMoneagle and the other guys. I thought, wow, did Finney learn about this and then write about it? And then I looked up when we're told that the RV program started, 72 or 73. I'm like, well, did they get the idea from Jack Finney? Or did the thing actually start earlier. than we're told? So I was intrigued with all this. It's like, okay, usually time travel stories had time machines, right?
Yeah.
Some type of technology.
Some sort of device. Yes.
Yeah. And so everybody, oh, you got to have a time machine. You got to have a device. You got to have this, that, or the other. And yet here comes Finney. And 5 years later, his colleague, Richard Matheson, writing about this consciousness, will activated time travel method. And what's really even more interesting about Somewhere in Time is my associate, the author Sesh Hari. He did an in-depth analysis of the film Somewhere in Time. I provided, it was private analyses that we did, and he wrote this series of letters that I kept private for like 10 years. And the movie, which Matheson also adapted from his novel, the movie is chock full of interesting Egyptian symbolism about about Isis and Osiris and Set. And wow, when it's obvious down to the numerology, the hotel room numbers, the all sorts of little details, to the extent where for 10 years, Sesh and we are convinced that Richard Matheson from somewhere or someone learned something about time and space that he embedded in that screenplay. And I asked his son, RC, who's an award-winning author himself, if his dad ever talked much about Egyptian symbology, and he said no, not that. So I didn't go into it further with him.
Yeah, you didn't want to pressure that.
Yeah, but so this has been intriguing me for some years now, and I thought, well, what if it's possible? How would it work? Let's take what Finney writes in his book and what Matheson writes in his book. Then let me take some of my own meanderings, some of my own experiences that make me think I did this after death, folks. I do not think I've traveled through time, while living. And also a gentleman by the name of C.W. Chanter, who has discussed what's called the 20-year time loop. And it's really a profound way of looking at it. And what he does is he says, go back 20 years, immerse yourself in the music and the films and the other little things. And, you can put your mind back there. You can maybe feel the reality of that era. And it's really, really an interesting approach. And it's very much like Matheson and Finney. So I decided, you know what? I think a way to approach the subject is, again, basically, hey, have good fun with the book. It's just thought-provoking. You can see I kept it short. But push comes to shove, as I say in the book, if it works, I do say you might not want to say anything or tell anyone if it works, because think about the implications, about how much potential trouble you could get into, right?
Exactly.
So it's one of those things where, hey, have fun with it. I'm not telling you to believe that time travel is possible, but if you want to try the method, you won't know if it does or doesn't work if you don't try it. So it's safe to try. However, I caveat it, the reader and the person who attempts to do it, your sanity and well-being are your own responsibility, not mine.
Exactly. And they'll be at another time and place, so they can't come after you for anything. It's kind of like, see you in 30 years.
It's not my fault, but I will tell you, it's also my opinion. There's nothing whatsoever, in my opinion, unethical about doing a biff. Now, most people will know what I mean by doing a biff. It's from Back to the Future, where Biff figures out, hey, I'll take the sports almanac, go back in time and bet and become a millionaire. I see nothing wrong with that. Just I wouldn't tell anyone,
what you're doing. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I do some humorous little, things that are actually practical. I say, when you get back there, don't go walking up to anybody saying you're a time traveler, because if you go back far enough, that's going to land you right in, a psychiatric hospital, and you ain't getting out.
Yep. Or if you go back far enough as well, you're going to be at the stake and you're going to be burnt alive.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And in the book, I recommend for novice time travelers to limit it to only 50 years, because go back to the 1970s and it's still going to be a familiar enough world to you where you can get around without getting in trouble. But you start going back,
Now,
75 or 100 or more years, that gets
now
more complicated.
I got questions. I got some
Yes.
questions. Now, is it are you and it doesn't sound like you're going to say no to this. Or you're going to like, are you you're not limited to your age. So if I was, I'm 48, I can only go back 48 years because that's when I was living within this time.
Well, no. Well, yeah. Technically, you couldn't go back. Well, according to this, yes.
Okay.
It's, if I'm right, that your age has something to do with the after death. Well, actually, it's a yes and no, because what you're asking, it's a yes, in my opinion, hypothetically, if you're talking about the after death within your own lifeline.
Yeah.
Of course, if you only live 48 or 61 or 75, yeah, you could only go back that number of years, and relive the whole thing. That's practical, right?
That's one route to go back in time, but there's other ways. There could possibly be, yes.
If you do the consciousness driven, will powered time travel, as I talk about in the book, as is dramatized in Somewhere in Time and in the novel Time and Again, like we've been talking about, you could go back. Hypothetically, the idea is you could go back way before you were actually born in this particular life, because that's a different animal. That, I think I'm very egalitarian about extraordinary forces and powers and psychic gifts or anything on the, the paranormal, whatever. I'm egalitarian about it. I really believe that every human being is capable of this stuff. It all depends on, your social conditioning. It depends on your personal comfort level with these things. But I don't think, when I hear people propping themselves up as special because of these gifts, that's where I kind of, go, you're not as special as you think. It's just because the other people are either not comfortable or it hasn't been, developed in them.
I totally agree. I think it's like a muscle of sorts, like once we exercise that muscle more and more, as long as we know we have that muscle too, like you're saying, if you don't know you have that muscle, how are you to exercise it? How are you to know that you have this ability? And I agree wholeheartedly with you that I believe we all have these, in these gifts. But I believe that somewhere in our past, possibly we were governed, or modded down or something, or subdued in a way, like to forget what we have. And I believe, don't ask me when, because I don't know.
Well,
I think it's happened.
I'll offer a possible starting point. I think one of the definite possibilities that we could put on the list was the beginning of organized religion. Now, I'm not an atheist. I do have an issue with organized religions, because they just, many of them, particularly in the West, they tend to be the biggest trust me bro grifts, in history. And it's about controlling the people, about controlling the population. And my gosh, if you want to control them, take away their belief and their ability to do these extraordinary things, because you got to keep them down. That, those special things are only for those who our little club deems holy, only for the priesthood, that kind of thing. And then label everything you want people to stay away from, label it the devil. And there you go. And look, religious conditioning has had a lot to do with people's rejection or resistance or fear of these things. Don't get me wrong, I'm not one of those fools who, oh, angels exist, but I don't believe in demons. Oh, give me a break. That's idiotic. Here's the thing: there are hazards, there are scary, bad, truly evil things out there in the full spectrum. So yeah, you're going to be dealing with them if you use the full spectrum of human abilities. So it's not that there's not bad things out there, but what I'm saying is it's not evil for you to develop and use what you naturally have. The evil is what might be out there trying to get you, but you using them, that's not evil. And sin, oh boy, give me a break. Again, this is a tool that the priesthood, one of the biggest groups of narcissists in humankind, are your priesthoods. So that and I hate to have harped on that for so long, but that's a big reason why people reject and fear these things.
That is, I think that plays a big part in it all. Like this control is a big thing.
And technocrats. Then there's technocrats, the people that they want to control all the technology and the special knowledge, and you and I aren't worthy of it. And so they will keep this knowledge to themselves. They would be the ones who would police those. In other words, like I say in the book, you might not want to tell anyone if you've done this, because if anyone's going to know that someone's doing this, it's going to be one of the technocrat people. You've seen, there's been a couple of movies where there's like people who police time travelers, right? There was one with Samuel L. Jackson, and there's been others. Well,
Van Damme, Time Cop, yeah.
I think there's something to that concept. There probably is some agency that you go doing this, it's like, I'd like to walk around Disneyland in 1955. In fact, I put that in a novel, a guy who travels back, that I wrote in the early 90s. But, there I am at Disneyland, 1955, the year it opens. And I would have no doubt that somebody would tap on my shoulder, Mr. Bosley.
What are you doing here?
Good, very clever of you.
Yeah.
We need to talk with you.
Kind of like a, what is that? Like an Agent Smith almost, Yeah.
Yeah, and it would be one of those things where, they could stop you if they disabled you. And if they want to go that heinous, where they would actually find a way to disable someone for doing this, well, that wouldn't shock me either, unfortunately. But I think for the most part, it would be one of those things, very clever. You figured this out. You'll keep your mouth shut. And you'll be cautious and not do certain things because we won't let you do certain things. So and that's just, and many people think that would be possible. Clearly there's movies, made about it. It's something that it's very intriguing, and I think is worth trying. It's worth pursuing.
I agree. I've talked about this in the past many years ago about time travel, but kind of like this consciousness time travel, where it was more of an internal time travel, where I said that, you can't necessarily change the outcomes of something, but you can change how you feel about something, know, and where you could be, your concept of how it affected you drastically changes the person you are now. So why not you go back, grab that little slate of that memory that you have of how things happened. Like I said, you can't change the event, but you can change how you feel about that event. Yeah. And if you change that, you can actually change everything in your life as it is now.
I like that. I like that idea. When you're saying that, what I'm thinking about is I've been doing this unintended. It's just what you do when you're driving around or thinking about life. I do this mental thing where I think about my dad when he was my age that I am now, or my dad at, when I was this age. Oh, okay, here's my dad when he was the same age. And it's interesting, the perspective, in some cases, shift or greater understanding you get. It's like, wow, okay, when my dad did this thing or had this happen to him, I'm already like 10 years older than he was, at that time. I'm thinking, okay, my perception being younger, of course you perceive your parents as always being older than they really are. And then when you get to the age and you're like, wait a minute, my dad wasn't an old man at 60. I got gray beard, stuff, but I'm not an old man yet. And it really is an interesting exercise. And in that, you can find one of those things that your emotional grappling hook can latch onto. It doesn't have to be like in the romantic stories. It can be literally you want to go visit, your dad,
Yeah.
when he was a
Yeah.
kid or something, which is reminiscent of, Field of Dreams. And, we can't talk too much about that or there will be two men who will be blubbering tears. But that movie, I cannot
Yes.
get through that film because I grew up around baseball. My dad loved baseball, was a baseball coach. So, oh my God,
Yeah,
and then when Lou
choking you up
Gossett,
there. Yeah.
when James Earl Jones passed away, last
Mm.
week, and they keep
Mhm.
showing that clip from when he walks, it kills you. But it's there's an example of what can be a good thing to latch onto
Mhm.
in the consciousness driven time travel exercises. So
Yeah. Now, if you go back and let's say you manage to do that, are you creating a divergent timeline? Are you now, or are you going to be staying on? I would call this like the prime timeline. We're on the prime timeline, and are you jumping to another subsidiary of it, or
yeah,
how?
that's the question. I don't know the answer.
Mhm.
I do. Okay. I gotta confess something. I had this experience when I was in Iraq. It was in November of 2003.
Yeah,
The war was only what a year into
just
it,
getting into it.
and
Yeah,
yeah, just getting started.
yeah,
And I was over there, and I was doing I, I was involved with spook work over there, and we were doing our thing. I'll leave it
yeah.
at that. And so we're in our little unarmored little Toyota four-door sedan, a little tiny thing. We're dressed as Saudis, and we're in a keffiyeh and a jalabia, and underneath the jalabia, I've got an M4, which is the collapsible M16, fully auto capable, and we've got our sidearms and stuff, but it's kind of under there, and we're doing our thing, and suddenly we get surrounded. This pickup truck swerves, blocks us off. This is like after midnight, and like 9 guys pile out, and they lock and load, and we've got these AK-47s, which had like the hot knife through butter because this was not an armored vehicle, and we're dressed like Saudis. And team leader says, "Okay, let's show them our American IDs. Don't let them see the guns." Well, you think? And and I'm looking around, and it's weird. Is I've experienced this a couple of times. Time was doing this weird stopping thing, freezing thing, and it was like watching a 3D movie. I'm sitting in the back, team leader's driving, the other guy we're working with the passenger seat, and I'm seeing these barrels, at the window, and it's like a 3D movie where it's coming off the screen at you.
Wow.
And we give our IDs, and turns out that they were the new Iraqi police force, but they didn't have uniforms yet, so that's why they were in civilian clothes. And team leader recognized that because they all had matching members only jackets, and they didn't start out just by shooting us, because if they were that
Fair
nice,
enough.
we'd have been dead. Now, here's the thing: because time stretched and it was so weird for a long moment there. Um, since then, because of the way certain things have gone in life, I have wondered more than once, did we actually die that night? Were we actually shot to hell by these guys not knowing who and what we really were? But did I jump to another timeline and
To
escape
another Walter Bosley.
to a parallel in that same situation where we did not die?
Yeah.
I've wondered that, and I've had my good reasons for wondering that. That's another conversation. So based on that experience, I have to acknowledge that, okay, even in the consciousness driven time travel method, it could be that you're not actually going back into the very timeline you jumped from. It could be that you're going to, a parallel one, an alternate one,
Like
and then
you're Yeah, your mind, your consciousness is grasping out at something, which is your grappling hook, grasping out at the nearest latch point, which was this event, because this event was it wasn't that love, but it was a high emotion, high state event, and it
Yeah,
just pulled
it's
you over.
intense. It's
Yes.
intense. I've been in a few situations like that, and other people I know also, they tell you that the time has a way of stretching, and things that one of the stories that I've told really happened. I'm in Afghanistan on Chicken Street, Kabul, and I parked the car, and it's a British car, so I'm on the right side, so I'm on the sidewalk side, and just as I open my door, and I see the flash of steel, and this sword comes shooting in between the door frame and the top of the car, and this sword comes in, and I hold the door closed, but the guy's hand is keeping me from closing all the way. And he's doing this, chopping to try to get at my head. And
Oh
as
my
he's
God.
doing that, I'm holding tight, the door closed as tight as I can,
Yeah.
realizing I can't. I was carrying an AK-47, the full stock, not collapsible, and it was a small car, so I couldn't pick the rifle up and blast this guy through the glass. So I thought my sidearm's my only chance, and I'm holding the door closed. This guy's chopping at my head, and I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to shoot the guy through the window. I'm going to barrel out. I'm going to run down to Flower Street, turn right, and haul ass back to the compound and just get back there as fast as possible. I'll at least have my sidearm if anyone's chasing me. So here's the thing. All that I described to you must have been 3 seconds. And yet it stretched out, and it felt like, oh, I've got time to think about my egress route. I got time to, okay, I'm going to kill this guy, get out of the car. If anyone else, because a lot of times they do the one and there's others,
Okay.
get out if I have to pop anyone else. But the idea is to get going and get out of there,
Yeah.
and hopefully, alive. And then he pulls away from the car, and I'm like, okay, here's my chance. So I get out, it's raised, and there's some younger guy. It's an old man. He's a
Okay.
Pashtun. Okay. They were friends of the Taliban, but he's an old man, and he's cussing at me in his language. And there's two young guys holding him back, and there's a guy that we know personally, and he comes up to me, goes, "Oh my gosh, don't shoot him. He's just a crazy old man." I go, and I'm looking behind me,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and I say, "Okay, all right, I get it. Just get the sword out of his hand." And it all ended well. I did not have to shoot anyone, least of all an old man, and it was all good. But the moment that was going on, my experience of it just stretched and slowed down. And this is exactly what I experienced that night, a year or two later in Iraq, when we were surrounded. Time slowed down, and I stayed calm. I was placid. When the sword was like coming at me like that, I
Yeah.
was calm, able to think clearly, and okay, I'll do this, and but believe me, I was torqued up physically, because you are, but I was able to remain calm. And it's not until after those kind of things happen that you go, oh crap. I
Oh,
remember
yeah.
saying to the team leader, let's not do this again tomorrow night.
That's a story not many people can tell. Yeah, I pulled up and some guy started trying to stab me with the sword. That's maybe in the medieval times or something like that. Or
Well, it's almost embarrassing because I look back and I go, dang it, my situational awareness should have been on top of that.
Ooh.
But he came up at me just as in that right moment. And
Yeah.
you know
You've had some crazy experiences, Walter. It's really, really interesting. And like this time travel, this being in Afghanistan. I mean, yeah, Afghanistan and Iraq as well, and all over. Do you have any? We got a little more than 10 more minutes, or do you have any other stories that I would love to hear? Any other stories? Any other experiences that you've had?
well,
Something that stands
the
out.
thing which I've written about and talked about frequently is what really started my weird journey, and that was I woke up on a Sunday morning in December of 1979, and everything was different. First thing I did was I lifted my hands up and I looked at them, and my thought was, these are not my hands. And I looked at the wall, and there I was seeing a texture. And I remind people that I was a nerdy kid, never did drugs, didn't drink. So
let's set the stage on that one. Let's set the stage on that one.
Because it was the 70s, but I was Mr. Nerd and didn't do those things. So it wasn't a hangover. I wasn't high or anything, but boy, I might as well have been, because since I've been done cancer treatment, I do the gummies and the sleeping aids with the THC in them and stuff. And so now I kind of know what it's like to be there. And it was similar to that. It was like, oh, this reminds me of 79. But I got up and I went walking through the house, and I see my sisters, and I'm like, oh, there's my sisters. I'm like, oh, there's my mom. And at the time, it was very weird to me. Looking back on it, what I came to suspect, in my hypothesis, was that I had died and jumped back in my own time, my own lifetime. That's how I came to this theory. And I was back in my 16-year-old self. And the reason I said these aren't my hands was that they were my younger hands. It was like, wait a minute, these aren't my older hands. And I walking through the house, seeing my sisters, it's like, there's my sisters. They're young again. There's my mom. She's, young. Oh, my dad's alive. Oh, this is, what the heck? But yet the fog, the murk of what happened didn't quite allow me to consciously comprehend what possibly I think happened, is that I had jumped back in my own lifetime. So therefore I've relived, all those years since then. And it would explain, that experience. I've had people say, you were abducted, which I'm like, oh, God, people, it's not all about the ETs. Please stop.
Yeah.
I go, no, I was not abducted. Please stop it. Or you were this, you were a walk-in. Walk-in is kind of, a walk into my own self.
Yeah. Yes. Walk back.
Yeah. But it explains any deja vu I've ever had, any weird premonition about personal events in my life. It's like, well, if I had jumped back in my own life, it would make total sense. Now it could even be things like I had married someone else in the other lifetime and saw this other girl and thought, oh, wow, maybe I should have married her. And then this time I did and was like, oh, God, that was a mistake. There's hazards. There's hazards to want to go back and redo. Maybe you made the right choice the first time. You want to be careful with, second guessing your choices. It's like Captain Kirk says in Star Trek V, a movie that doesn't deserve the trashing that it gets. He says, what, go back and second guess all my choices and decisions? No. We learn from that. So
Star Trek V, is that
the Final Frontier? That's the one where the Cybok character, very much like Yahweh, tries to pass himself off as God. And that's the one where he's got even Spock all like, oh, this might be God. And Kirk is the one who says, excuse me. And the God figure, yes, my son. And he goes, what does God need with a starship? Because the God says, bring your starship closer. And he goes, what do you mean? He goes, and Bones is like, Jim, it's God. You don't question God. And he's like, no, seriously, if you're God, what do you need with a starship? And then he asks, who's this? And he goes, wait, you're God and you don't know who I am? And of course he gets zapped because the God figure is a narcissist and doesn't want to be questioned. And anyway, that's a whole conversation too. I love that film. Most people hate it. But so you got to be careful, I think, if you were to go back into your own life, wanting to change things. And so therefore, if you got to be careful in your own life, going back to kill Hitler or save JFK or something like that, you greater minds than mine have done these thought exercises of what might happen. If you think you're changing something for the better, is there a worse Hitler that would have,
filled that void?
Yeah, exactly. And so it gets into all these philosophical questions, and it turns out that, well, maybe I want to do it, and maybe I just want to observe or re-experience things, or maybe do a little, I don't know. I don't think you'd be able to resist.
Yeah, I understand. I've had multiple dreams where I travel back in time to my younger self, and there's one where I even tell my friends that, yeah, no, I am 40 years old or 39 years old or something like that, and they don't believe me. So I tell them, I tell them some things, and then I'm like, well, I guess I'm here. Like, I'm kind of stuck here. And then I'm like, well, I could change anything I want. But I'm like, no, because then I wouldn't be who I am today if I change any of those things in the past. Like if I didn't marry my ex, then I wouldn't be who I was.
Exactly. And one of the things, the stark things that makes you rethink changing things is if you have kids. I mean,
I do. Yeah.
I have my son, and I have since an adopted daughter, and I wouldn't want to do anything that would change them or the connection I have with them now, and certainly that might go back to a timeline where they don't exist. So that's the other thing you got to think of. You have to think of others. Darn it.
I know. Why can't I just be selfish?
Yeah, exactly. Why can't I just go back and go left instead of right instead of left that day or whatever.
But then you also have to wonder, like perhaps you do change things. Maybe destiny still has the your daughter or your son in store for you, and
sure.
We don't know. It's so grand that we just don't know.
Think about this too. Maybe the first time you live that timeline, maybe you're deciding not to do the certain thing was your intuition telling you shouldn't. And if you go back in time and relive it and decide to do it, maybe that's the time. Maybe you didn't ride that scary roller coaster. You go back and do it, and you learn why, because that roller coaster breaks down and you die riding it, or something like that.
I gotta ask, why did you bring up a roller coaster and dying on a roller coaster, which is really peculiar, because just last week I was talking about this roller coaster where I grew up. It was at one time the world's largest mall in Canada, and the roller coaster, after a year, there was an accident and people died on that roller coaster. And I just was talking about that last week. It's something I haven't talked about 20 years, 30 years. Yeah.
Wow. See, that was my unintentional remote viewing.
Exactly. So remote viewing of what was Rye talking about last week? Oh, he's talking about the mind bend, and it's actually called the mind bender as well.
Yeah. Here's the thing though on this. We joke, right? Because we don't know for sure, but the idea is not totally out of hand. Here we are talking. So naturally we're bringing our consciousness into this interaction. There's going to be things that I bring in my sphere and you, and if they mingle while we're talking, we're going to see glimpses, of that, and stuff's going to come up. Now it's going to happen organically and just seem random, but this is why people will confuse synchronicity as coincidence. Some coincidences are meaningful and therefore they are synchronicities that you really, should pay attention to. But it's so subtle that, you see, reality is some of these extraordinary things are presented to us, manifested so subtly that it's like, you can notice it and really expand your experience and stuff, or you can not notice it and go on with your life. That's, to me, the way nature is with this stuff.
I couldn't agree more with you. I could not agree more with you. Well, Walter, this has been a fantastic conversation. The hour has flown by, and I really appreciate this. And I think it's so I just want to say thank you for making the time.
Well, thank you for having me here. I enjoy it. I love these conversations, and it's fun to talk about this book, and it's a fun book. So
exactly. So why don't you tell everybody where they can find that book again, or where they can find all your books?
WalterBosley.com is the place to go for all my books. And if you want to see discussions on them, go to the Walter Bosley channel at YouTube and look through all the old videos, the old live streams. And, you'll find all sorts of stuff there that we talk about. And
Yeah.
Yeah.
When I can, I try to catch them. If I'm not working, I try to catch them because I thoroughly enjoy your live streams. I think they're fantastic. So,
Well,
Walter, I just want to say thank you again for coming on.
thank you.
All right, everyone. That was Walter Bosley. Fantastic guest with so much to say, so many experiences as well. I thoroughly enjoyed his take on time travel and, meeting at the crossroads with Hecate, and that possibility of, if you die, then you have the chance to go back in time to possibly when you're 16, as he was when he believes he passed away at 61. And I think we talked about this last time, when he thinks maybe he didn't beat cancer, and this time he went through and it took him out, and that's where he ended up. Now, I didn't bring this up to Walter, but I was going to say this was, with him doing all those gummies now and all those sleep aids, maybe it was something like that, and then it was a bad trip, and then he wakes up and he's like, I'm 16. Oh, what's going on? But no, I thoroughly enjoyed his take on this. And again, I just want to say, thank you to Walter. Also, so if you have any takes on time travel, if you've ever experienced time travel, and you don't want to share it to the world, you can always do it anonymously to me. You can email me at codexofcuriosities@gmail.com. And again, episodes are always dropped every Thursday on YouTube, Tuesday on audio. So everywhere you can find us. I want to say thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. Keep your curiosity wandering, keep the light lit, and always find your way home.
I look forward to our next adventure together as we navigate the mysteries that lie ahead. Until our paths cross again, keep your curiosity wandering, keep the light lit, and always find your way home.